Recently, our client Tommy met his banker to discuss continuing his father's restaurant legacy. In us, he found a partner that understood the importance of passing the torch. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Tommy.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 3, Episode 20. This is the show where we talk about The Mandalorian. It's Mandalorian all the time. Now that we've all caught up, we can talk about Mandalorians. Forget about that stupid Star Trek stuff.
Welcome to Mandalorian Cast.
Mandalorian, Mandocast. This is the way. All right, so now Jaime knows what we mean when we say that. Anyway, no, it's actually, folks, you haven't stumbled into the wrong podcast. This is, in fact, the show where we talk about all things Star Trek. Well, things Star Trek and others. This is Stardate 98562 Mark 74. My name is Timothy and I am on the Starship Toronto, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline on the Starship Mississauga.
Hello there.
And we're also joined by Jaime Lopez Jr. on the NCC Seattle.
How's it going?
Not too bad. Alrighty. So let's start digging with some fact check. Well, speaking of Christmas, which is just around the corner, we were talking about Die Hard last week as a Christmas show, and Jonathan postulated that he thought it wasn't released actually at Christmas time, and he was correct. Woo! It was released on July 20th, 1988, which is, I don't know, a lot of years ago. And I was teasing these guys. I knew, in fact, who the last person to walk on the moon was. I was just, seeing if they knew. Commander of the Apollo 17 mission, which was the last mission, Gene Cernan was the I guess he was the 11th man to walk on the moon, but he was also the last man to walk on the moon.
Yeah, that's the confusing thing, because it said in the article that he was not the last person, but he wasn't the last person in history, but he was the last person chronologically. Yeah, it's a weird distinction. So I guess he walked on the moon as the 11th, and then Schmidt walked on the moon as the 12th, but then he was the last person to walk on the moon. And apparently wrote his initials as he left. Yeah,
and Schmidt was the first non-Army, Navy, military test flighty kind of guy. He was actually a geologist. And
he worked for NASA, right?
Yeah, well, they all worked for NASA. Yeah,
no, but I mean, he was hired by NASA, not out of the military.
Yeah, and they brought him on because they realized that they needed to study more. He got his professor to come and teach the astronauts about geography, and which is why, when you see them, when you watch the films of them getting excited about finding orange soil, they're like, oh, look, orange soil over here, because they're walking around on a big cigarette ashtray, right? The whole place is like completely looks like somebody butted out all their cigarettes, right?
Yeah, it's powder. Right?
But they did find, and of course orange soil is indication of iron and oxygen, right? So, or water and that kind of stuff. So they got really excited about the different kinds of rocks that are on the moon. And essentially the moon is made from Earth, right? It's I forget what we call the word term, but it kind of, when Earth was molten, it kind of spun off on its own thing. And so it, wouldn't be surprised if everything they found on the moon is similar to it makes up the geology of Earth anyway. Alrighty. And then Jonathan, you got some fact-checky stuff.
Yeah, I got a couple of things here. We were talking about the James Bond movies and the fact that some of them are making their way onto streaming services, including YouTube and Crave here in Canada. And Tim, I think you had mentioned at one point 19 movies, and in fact there are 24.
Article headline,
yes, and there's actually 25 is the one. No Time to Die is going to be our 25th Bond flick.
So I wonder if that means that it's everything but the Daniel Craig series. I'm just going back to that article, see if we can find it here.
Yeah.
That was last week or 2 weeks ago?
No, it was last week. And the other piece of information I got is we were discussing the episode last week where there was this very theatrical performance of the rise of Emperor Georgiou in Terra Firma Part 1. And there was a performance that included these performers rolling themselves up and down using these sort of silk banners. And we weren't sure if there was a term for that, so I did look it up, and it's actually called aerial silk. And aerial silk is this sort of form of performance where, with either one or two pieces of this very long silk descending from the ceiling, people roll themselves up and down and use it in sort of a gymnastics artistry. It's interesting having now looked into it, just sort of the how it's done in the...
It has a name. What do you know? And just to follow up on real-time follow-up on the James Bond story, the headline is the first 19 movies.
There you go.
So it's obviously not the Daniel Craig series, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
because he did what, 4, 5?
He's done 4 so far. I wonder if they're also omitting the Never Say Never Again, the Connery one that's not official.
Oh, they don't count that as a Bond movie, though.
Yeah.
They?
No, I don't think they do.
No.
But they also don't count the original Casino Royale either.
Which is that's a comedy one?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. With David Niven as James Bond, right?
Correct.
And Woody Allen as Blofeld?
Yep.
Whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. Alrighty. So headlines. Headlines. This is a kind of sad story, and this is fitting with the whole Star Wars universe. Jeremy Bulloch, who was the first original Boba Fett actor, has died at 75 years old. So I picked that up from Mike actually on Facebook. But
yeah, I saw it after as well, and was gonna paste it in, and saw that you had beat me to the punch.
Man,
it's been continuing a bad year for these actors in this franchise. We seem to have lost a bunch of them, which is really really sad. Obviously, we never saw his face. He was simply the man behind the mask. Yeah, which is actually how he branded himself. He used to go to all the sci-fi conventions and stuff like that. They would do the men behind the mask, where it would be him and David Prowse and the actors who were all wearing the alien masks and stuff.
Bosk and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, but he was much. He definitely made the most of his moment in the sunshine, because he definitely was a presence at those shows, and people were always excited to meet the man behind this iconic character.
Right. Cool. Yeah.
But R.I.P. sir. Thank you for your performance. He was very menacing in his way, in the same way that David Prowse was. Very sort of cool. Just very simple things, just sort of nod of the head and body motion.
Did he even
and
speak?
stuff.
Did he even have speaking line?
So Boba Fett does speak in Empire Strikes Back, but I don't know. I think all he does is in Return of the Jedi is scream as he falls into the Sarlacc pit. But I don't know if that was actually Jeremy Bulloch's voice or if he was dubbed over for that.
All right. Jaime, you're up.
Very briefly here. Apparently in 2022, we will be graced by the fine folks at Netflix with a 3D animated Sonic the Hedgehog TV show. This is presumably fully 3D animated, as opposed to the mixture of CG animation and live action from the Sonic movie.
Was there like a guy in a little blue suit running around in that one?
Actually, I haven't seen the making of, so I don't know what sort of thing or person they might have had as a stand-in. I'm not sure.
Also remains to be seen which of the two Sonic the Hedgehogs we're going to see, right?
Is it the
scary one or the just in time for Halloween?
Yeah, that'd be pretty classic if they were to intentionally do that and then be like, oh, sorry, glitch, and then it repairs itself. Loading. Oh, okay, look, it looks better when it's in full HD.
Well, maybe after he falls into the vat of makeup goo like Joker does, right? He'll turn into the evil Sonic.
Right.
But maybe when they do the Mirror Universe episode of Sonic, that'll be his mirror. He'll be like, what's wrong with the mirror? It's a funhouse mirror.
Yeah. All right. Oh, look at this. More news from Wonder Woman. I think this is the Wonder Woman show, it seems like.
Yeah, the ongoing saga. Well, listen, I think this is a great one. So this, folks, is a Spockcast Gets Action story here. So when I used to work at the newspaper, we used to take our editor-in-chief...
The Toronto Star, for those of you following at home.
Yeah. We used to get orders from our boss, who used to say, when we would put this is a Star exclusive over top of a story, and then if something happened as a result of that story, then the follow-up story would say the Star gets action. And I always thought that was a little self-serving, but here we are, and I'm going to say Spockcast gets action, because we have been talking about how ridiculous it is, the fact that Wonder Woman 1984 was originally announced that it was going to be coming to HBO Max in the United States, and also being released in theaters, where in Canada it was only going to be coming to theaters. And we talked about how nonsensical that was, because people can obviously in this day and age use any kinds of technology to find this online. And lo and behold, this week we got the news. They have announced that Wonder Woman 1984 is coming to streaming in Canada on Christmas Day. So hallelujah. And
for money though.
Yes. So it is going to be a cost. It is listed at $29.99 Canadian. So that's what, like $8 US?
$50, 50 cents.
Yeah. And the only thing that this story is not clear on, and I've checked to see if there's been any updates this week, it doesn't say how. It says it's coming to streaming on Christmas Day, and the cost is going to be $29.99. It does not say how.
Right.
So the obvious options would be coming to iTunes or to on demand through cable services like Rogers On Demand or any of those, with your local cable companies often have on demand services. So perhaps it's a purchase through there. Apparently, when you purchase it for $29.99, it is yours to watch as many times as you like in a 48-hour period. So good news on that front. The bad news is you won't get your real money's worth because unless you have a big house full of people that you happen to live with, you're not allowed to go anywhere or see anybody. So you're confined to really only doing it for yourself and like the people that live in your immediate home.
Right.
But still, I'm glad that this is at least moving forward. It was a real, especially given that we had moved into a lockdown back here in this area of Canada. It was a bit of a slap in the face where they're like, yeah, you have to go see it in a theater, but don't leave your area, and all the theaters are closed.
Well, and at the risk of losing, like, 3/4 of our Canadian audience, or sorry, not even that much, I guess, if you do the math. Toronto is like in lockdown, and it's the biggest populated center in Canada, right? So it's a huge market to sort of lock out by doing. I mean, the only way we're seeing movies now is by a few drive-ins where you drive your car up and watch movies. Tenet was shown that way a few weeks ago, sold out immediately. A few other things like that. But yeah, unless you're really sitting in your car in the minus 6 degrees temperature Celsius.
Yeah, with the snow blowing across your windshield.
Yeah, exactly.
When the drive-in loses its luster a little bit when you can't see the screen for the snow.
Right. And you have to keep the car running, and yep.
Yeah, but it's a strange one too, because again, they were saying, well, it's available in theaters, but like all the theaters in the densest portions of the Greater Toronto area are shut down because of the lockdown related to COVID-19.
Right. Yep.
So you're not supposed to do that. You could go to an outlying region to go see it, but they are encouraging you not to leave your current region because they don't want it to spread. So it really did paint us into a corner. So anyway.
Well, there'll be more follow-up on movies and stuff like that later, I'm sure.
Yes.
With respect to COVID.
Yes, no doubt. Speaking of which, Jaime had mentioned last week that there was some blowback about the decision to go to HBO Max with all these different things. Christopher Nolan was, I think, the one who lost it about the idea of going away from theatrical and into HBO Max as a distribution for new movies. Well, following that up, Canada's own Denis Villeneuve, who is the director of the new Dune movie, went off this week and basically reiterated the same thing, saying, I did this because it was going to be this, start of a theatrical franchise. And if you're taking this thing and you're putting it on TV, is that going to motivate people to want to think of this as a big screen trilogy if they've only ever seen the first part on TV? So he has, some pretty good concerns. He wrote an op-ed for Variety magazine or online, Variety.com, saying that, he thinks this is, he's basically doomed the franchise is what he's saying.
But Dune, like the Frank Herbert series, is a number of books, right? Is that the gist was that they were going to try and do more of those stories, or do you know?
Yeah, it was supposed to be It was supposed to be an ongoing, like the idea was if this was successful, and they did put every effort into making it successful, obviously by hiring someone with the credentials of Denis Villeneuve, as well as, they've casted up the yin yang, it's filled with stars. It was very clearly what they envisioned to be the start of their next franchise. Right. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, this is not going to be a great start for what could have been a franchise.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that perspective, and I'm disappointed that they didn't go through and ask, like, cool, so what's your proposal, right? Yeah. To deal with the situation. Is like, these are all good points. I'm not disagreeing with his points. Was like, yeah, I mean, you would want to do that. So what is your proposal? Hold the movie to 2022? Release it during the pandemic? Like, what? It's one thing to have like, this might be killer for it. It's like, well, holding it out for another year might also be problematic for it too, right? You end up in a New Mutants situation where the dang movie never comes out, and And by the time it does, people kind of forget what it was.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, Dune is a little different in that it's easier to remember what Dune is, but I think you end up with the possibility of like, oh no, this one actor was involved in the problem, and now we got to get Chris Plummer to come in and reshoot his scenes, right? You keep running that clock, and you start running into problems.
Yeah, the quotes are interesting, so I'll just read a quick bit of the quotes that he had in this op-ed he wrote. He says, streaming can produce great content, but not movies of Dune's scope and scale. Warner Brothers' decision means Dune won't have the chance to perform financially in order to be viable, and piracy will ultimately triumph. Warner Brothers might have just killed the Dune franchise. This one is for the fans. AT&T's John Stanky says that the streaming horse has left the barn. In truth, the horse left the barn for the slaughterhouse. This is pretty over the top. Yeah, this is pretty over the top.
Yeah, it's one thing I got to say about this whole COVID experience is that when people like this, who you tend to want to respect, go off on these sort of ludicrous tangents, it's like, what do you expect? Like, you're lucky you have a movie to show people. Like, some people are dying, never mind watching movies,
It's fair, although I wanted to ask you this one from an artist's perspective. So you, I think, are more of an artist than most.
Yeah.
The goal of the artist is to, speak their truth and then have people, as many people generally as possible, to take it in, right? So if this person views himself as an artist and he's creating this because he sees it as art, is this just, whinging because he feels like it's going to diminish his opportunity to have his art taken in on the scale that he wants it to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, that there is that side of it. I mean, there is, and I always go off about George Lucas and seeing, like, I remember when Star Wars started coming out on VHS, I got really upset about the fact that it wasn't in letterbox and stuff like that, because that was the format that it was, envisioned in, and that was the format it was made in. And then, when Luke looks through the binoculars and says, "Oh, look, there's a couple of sand people," there's no sand people on the screen.
Yep.
Because of the way it was cut.
Well, that was
right?
how you taught me what letterboxing was. I had no idea. And you were like, it doesn't make sense. Look at it. I said, I don't understand. Then you showed me the letterbox. I was like,
those
okay.
people.
All right.
Yeah. But anyway, so there is the side of, you want to experience it in the format that it's meant in. And admittedly, all three of us are movie files, right? So all three of us are like, you got to see it with the big sound, with the big screen, with the big bucket and the big gulp, like in the comfy chair, with thousands or hundreds of other people who are all tribally experiencing the same shock and horror at the same time as you are, right? I mean, that's the whole point of going to a movie, is to sort of, try and fill your peripheral vision with this experience that somebody has created artistically, right? And so there's that side of it, but there's also the coming back to the give it a rest argument, I'm sorry, but right now nobody can go to an art gallery and nobody can go, to a museum. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. One of the things is this walk through Vincent Van Gogh experience. Don't get me started on that one. I think that's a complete waste of time and very kitschy sort of way of looking at somebody's work. But there's the whole I get it, dude. I get the fact that you're upset about this. Like for instance, me, I never saw The Return of the Jedi in the movie theater until 1998 when it came out again. And that was the redo ones with the Cloud City redos and the
inexplicable animals that added to it, and I think they had Anakin Skywalker beside the ghosts, besides Obi-Wan and Yoda. That was that version, right? And the Greedo shooting first versions. But because I did go see the New Hope in the theater in Vancouver when I was living out there, right? I went with a bunch of friends because I had seen it in the theater and I hadn't seen it on the large screen since, And I mean, that doesn't mean that they couldn't come out with, say, a Tenet, or they couldn't come out with Dune now, and in 5 years when all's clear, you can't go to the theater and watch it again. I do it all the time. I go see movies from this. I saw Time Bandits, 2 years ago. Carol and I went and watched them on the TIFF on the big screen, and I'd only ever seen Time Bandits. It's one of my favorite movies. I'd only ever seen it on VHS, Blu-ray, and DVD, right? I had never experienced it on the large screen. But the one thing you're forgetting, Tim, is that you're very lucky in that you live in Toronto. In Toronto, you can do that, and that's certainly an option for you. It's definitely less so in other communities. The smaller communities, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but from what coming back to the how the artist intends it, which is the argument I'm always sort of giving you, is like, I get that. Yeah, I feel for you, Mr. Villeneuve. I know you want us to experience this in the large screen format, and same with Nolan. But it's 2020, right? Give it a rest. There's only so much we can do. I mean, like either like Jaime says, you shelve it till 2022, and we might remember to go see your movie then, but because Tom Cruise will have some sort of 3D, in your face movie coming out at that point in time, as well. But and you'll be competing with that, right? And I don't know. I mean, it's sort of, I get it. I want to go to New York to the MoMA to see the Van Gogh hanging on the wall. I want to go stand in front of a. You cannot. I don't care what anybody tells you. You cannot experience a Jackson Pollock painting in a book or on a slide in a lecture hall. You have to go stand in front of one of them.
Yep. Having
That's
done
the
that, I completely agree. There's no way you could reproduce that short of, some newfangled technology.
Okay. In the case people who are transporting at home don't know this, he literally just threw paint at the canvas.
Yeah, each one of his paintings is like 4 inches thick. It's crazy.
Well, it's not so much 4 inches thick. It's just, but there is definitely depth to it, and there's expression to it, and you have to, and they're huge. They're the size of a big, large bedroom kind of thing. And same with Monet's what do they call it? Lily pad paintings, right? You have to stand in front of those, right, to sort of experience them. Or Guernica, or Demoiselle d'Avignon. It's not a tiny little postage stamp of a painting. And then again, on the other side, you got Van Gogh's paintings, which are the size of a 24-inch monitor, maybe not even that big.
Yeah, the one that blew me away was the one who paints the melting clocks.
Right. Dali.
Dali. The first time I saw Dali, it's the size of 2 iPhones. It's tiny.
Yeah. Persistence of memory for those of you driving at home.
Sorry, I didn't get a BFA, so I don't.
No, I just as I said it, I'm thinking I'm supposed to say where it was painted and what year too, but I can't remember.
Well, you did graduate, like 40 years ago? Sorry.
That's, so to answer your question about, it's funny because I did take a course in sort of, you have to do humanities as well as art and all that kind of stuff. And one of the courses I took was a humanity about art, and it was the role of the artist in society. And it was based on a book, but the gist of the course was, and this is where I kind of learned what it is that the role of, and you take this the way you take it with a grain of salt, of course, but it's the artist's role in society to observe what's going on, right? And to make a piece of art that reflects what's going on, whether it's a story or a movie or a painting or a sculpture, that reflects the time to give people now and people in the future some way to experience that story, the telling of whatever it is, whether it's late, however, if it's about painting, then it's about how the paint goes down. But if it's about, Guernica, it's about it has a story there's a story behind the reason why the painting was painted that way, right? So now, you should be painting paintings of people staring into their little square devices in their hand and wearing masks and, standing 6 feet apart. That's what today's experience is like, right? Mm-hmm. It's not sitting in a theater with 100 other people potentially killing yourself because you want to see a big screen spectacle. You know what I mean?
Yep. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I saw on the news the other day that a new Banksy turned up in England, and it is of a person sneezing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you exactly what you just described, right? It was the artist seeing the times and reflecting it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I took a picture of Quinn's dolls. She was playing early in the whole Quinn's 5, for those of you who don't know, playing with her dolls in the living room with Carol, and she had them all stand like they're all like a certain 18 inches apart, but like she's like the dolls are social distancing, like they're like this is what the 5-year-old experience is, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry. Oh yeah, it's podcast. Yes.
No, it's a good digression. Again, this is not the first time this has come up, and it will not be the last.
Yes. Speaking of doctors,
just a quick one. There has been some more casting news for House of the Dragon, which is the prequel series to Game of Thrones HBO is working on. This week we got news that Matt Smith, former Doctor Who himself, is going to be joining the cast. They have not said in what role. And also joining him is Olivia Cook, who was the female lead in Ready Player One. And it was part of a large number of casting announcements they made related to this show, which which seems like it's picking up steam. So that's good news. And I think Smith is doing an interesting job of sort of separating himself from the Doctor. Obviously he was on The Crown. He's done some different interesting roles the last few years. It'll be interesting to see if this role can sort of remove some of the cloud of Doctor Who from him.
Yeah, it's funny. I met him at Fan Expo and got a photograph signed by him, and I had just seen the Crown, and I said, "Oh, you're my favorite Doctor," and la la la, right? Totally forgot to say, and I saw you in The Crown.
Yeah,
as Prince Philip.
I'm sure he'd appreciate more of those.
Well, yeah, you're more than just a screwdriver wielding guy, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and he was just so good. I mean, it is a memorable role, but
yeah, for sure.
Life goes on.
Yep. Next.
Apparently there's going to be a new Dungeons and Dragons movie adaptation. So the last one I could think of had Jeremy Irons as the villain. No word yet as to whether he'll reprise any roles here. Apparently Chris Pine has been attached. So if you remember 2009 Star Trek, or if you have seen the male love interest for Wonder Woman, that's Chris Pine.
There you go.
Yeah. Apparently it's been 20 years since that other movie came out.
Yeah. Does Dungeons and Dragons have any gravitas as anything other than a game? There was a cartoon series when I was a kid that I was fond of that ran for a couple of, just on Saturday mornings for a couple of years. I just don't, when I hear Dungeons and Dragons, it never makes me think like, oh, that could be good. It makes me think, oh, that sounds desperate. Or some company could only afford really low level IP.
It's a weird one because you would think on the surface of like, hey, well, it's got, the eponymous Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Isn't that basically Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter? There's like a whole bunch of different ways you could take it. Is it Game of Thrones? And like, yes-ish. I just think that the brand is so hyper specific to a particular kind of fandom that I kind of wonder whether it can truly be mainstream, right? Like I almost feel like it needs to not be part of the main title. It needs to be blah, 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 a Dungeons and Dragons story or something, right? It's kind of a subtitle.
Well, in these days when an IP like Dungeons and Dragons, which is a name people know, even if they've never played the game or really understand it, they know the name. That's what people really want to glom onto, right? Is, oh, I know that name. It could be good, but I don't know. It's hard to get excited until you at least see something rolling on this especially because the last one was such a flop too.
Yeah, the last one was a little too cheeseball, I think. I think if you did a different edge to it, you could make it work maybe, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
And now the moment you've been waiting for.
Yeah, we don't really have follow-up on this show, so this is the closest we have, and that's the full movie. And movie is rather sort of sporting. It's a short film, right? It's 16 minutes and 1 second, it says here. We're talking about A Recipe for Seduction, the collaboration between KFC and Lifetime Originals. I did watch this. I don't have Lifetime in our household, so we had to wait for it to be on the interwebs. My significant other was baffled because she doesn't watch Lifetime, so she doesn't understand. I said, no. They took an entire Lifetime movie set of tropes and they just crammed it all into this 15, 16 minutes. And she's like, well, this is nutty. I'm like, yeah, that's how the way they are, except, normally it's like a plum, right? There's some filler in there, but this is like a prune. They've just removed all the juices and you have nothing left but the pulp, and it's very pulpy.
So you watched it for 16 minutes, did you?
It's not very, I mean, you could watch this while, waiting for your cup of coffee to be made or eat a sandwich or something. It's very easily, taken in. And while they don't go into the, as Jonathan called it, the KFCU, the cinematic universe that I had proposed, they do leave open the possibility of a sequel. So we'll see what happens here.
Oh, from your lips to the producer's ears.
All right.
A franchise we never knew we wanted.
Speaking of franchises.
Yeah, so we spoke last week about the great Disney Plus expansion plans, which, were far-reaching. And we were very excited about all these different properties that are coming based on, of course, Star Wars and Marvel and Willow and all these great things. Well, the bill came due, and they have announced that the price is going up. Not surprising, I suppose. $3 per month is what the cost is going up here in Canada. And that is starting in February.
Wait, up by $3?
Up by $3 a month in February. It's going up from...
Disney needs your money?
Well, apparently to finance all these new shows.
Oh, okay.
So right now it's $8.99 per month. It'll be going up to $12 or $11.99 per month as of February 23rd, 2021. And it's coming on the same day that they are releasing Star, that new Hulu international platform inside of Disney Plus.
Right.
So you're going to get dinged for $3, but they're going to mitigate the ding by giving you a bunch of new content and then the promise of more to come. By then you'll be 4 weeks or more than that, five weeks into WandaVision, and you won't care that you're spending that much more. Now, the nice thing is obviously you can lock in for a year. They do still have yearly rates. So if you're locked in, obviously they're not going to raise it on you in the interim. You're locked in at that cost till your term runs out. Yeah.
Right.
So this was shocking to me, but then I had to do the translation into US dollars. I think this feels like it's just aligning the price and making it the same as the US. So the US, and I know this because I just did sign up for Disney Plus. We'll talk more about that later. Is $6.99. Let's call it $7. Well, translating your $8.99 Canadian is roughly $7 US, and translating the $11.99 Canadian becomes around $9 US. So I think we said it was going to go up from $7 to like $8 in the US, right? And then maybe go up to $9 after that. So it feels like it's a price conversion or currency conversion problem here.
Yeah. And there is obviously always going to be some fluctuations between our dollar's value, and all those different things sort of come into play. But yeah, I don't think it's out of whack. And we talked about it last week as well, that Netflix here in Canada, if you have the 4K version and the multi-license,
like $15-$16, isn't it?
It's going to be up near 20. So
20, okay.
You are still, in the course of time, Disney Plus still is a pretty good value for what you're spending. And the fact that they are pretty much locking in now to having a new piece of IP, not a recycled, not a, piece that is coming from some other property, but they are bringing you a new piece of IP that's usually Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, high end, every single week going forward from now until the end of time. That doesn't seem like a bad investment.
Anyway, what's up? What else is going on Disney Plus?
Maybe they need to charge all of us so much more money is because they do have just so many things coming out that they have made a new thing called Legends, which is apparently a clip show to help get you up to speed with what the heck is going on as this starts becoming very similar to the source material, where it can be a little hard to keep track of, wait a minute, what's going on in the storyline? And there you go. You can have the quick recap here. Apparently this is going to showcase, presumably if, new Thor movie coming out, it'd be like, all right, let's, how did Thor get here? But I could see them even doing it for the new characters of like, who is this other Miss Marvel? Is that not just Captain Marvel? Well, no, they're not. And here's where they can explain the difference. So it's pretty brilliant in many respects. I certainly appreciate the lighter weight version of this where, what was it? I think it was Netflix for The Umbrella Academy. Season 2 begins with a season 1 recap. So you understand the nutty things that happened and then, okay, go, here's the new parts that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and it really did make sense. I agree with you, Jaime. I think it really made sense when you think about it in the larger picture. We've obviously been watching these movies since the beginning because this is a genre we're interested in. But then you think back and think, oh, it's been almost 12 years since Iron Man came out and the MCU kicked off. Yeah. And in the interim, there's been 22 movies, plus there's more in development, plus now they're doing the shows, plus, you include the ancillary things like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., plus you want to include some of the comic book history. It's going to start getting muddled for people and they're going to start tuning out. And this is one of the challenges that comic books has always faced, right? They want you to like Spider-Man, but Spider-Man's been around since 1963 and there's thousands of comics that have been published with his stories. You're going to get lost. They need to have these little access points for a broader audience who can be like, okay, show me in 15 minutes everything I need to know to set me up for the show. So the first one of these Legends show they're going to do is Wanda and Vision from WandaVision, the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. They're going to basically give you everything you need to know about their appearances in the movies, their history. They're going to talk to the creators, and they're going to basically set the stage so that you can just come in and you don't have to go back and watch the last few Avengers movies or Civil War or any of that stuff because it'll all just be recapped for you. It's actually a really smart marketing move.
Yeah, and there's a link here to it in this article of the 52 things that Disney announced. That was last week's headline for us, right? right? There's so much stuff that, you need an article just to walk you through it, right?
Yeah, we didn't. There's all kinds of stuff that we really didn't get into last week. We barely scratched on, the Indiana Jones announcement, and they did announce that they're not going to recast T'Challa for the Black Panther 2. There's a ton of stuff. Like, it's funny because we talked about it for a good, 25 minutes, and there's still just so much more news coming out of this stuff.
Right.
Just bonanza. Like, it's ridiculous.
Speaking of everybody's favorite Star Wars robot.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was going to say the title here from this Ars Technica article that's Alan Tudyk plays a crime-solving alien in disguise in the Resident Alien trailer for Sci-Fi. This is a Sci-Fi Channel series. And if you're like, who's Alan Tudyk? Yes, he was the voice and motion captured actor for K2SO, the droid in Rogue One. He was also the character Alpha in the Eliza Dushku vehicle Dollhouse, and people probably know him most of all from Firefly.
Some people. Tammy doesn't know him.
Some people. Right. This does feel like a very sci-fi channel kind of show. I don't know. I'd say watch the trailer, see what you think. I think it will not have sort of a neutral sort of thing to it. It will either be like a cult favorite sort of thing, or it's going to be an utter flop. It's kind of hard to tell from watching the trailer. I feel like it could go like one of two ways. So I might check this out and see how it goes. See if it holds up for more than like an SNL skit sort of level of content.
Resident Alien that's the video game, right?
As Resident Evil, you're thinking of.
Oh, what's Resident Alien? I wonder then.
I think it's original.
So this guy is
watch the trailer.
Basically the trope of this guy's basically the trope of alien comes to Earth and tries to fit in and very clearly does not.
Oh, Man Who Fell to Earth. Mork, Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah, Starman with Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Yep, right, cool.
Yeah, I liked him. He did a web series for a few years called Con Man, Alan Tudyk, where he basically played a parody of himself trying to sort of, grow as an actor and everything else. It's kind of like that, the Brent Spiner, LeVar Burton thing we were talking about several episodes ago. A really good series. It's on iTunes. It's worth a watch. He is a beloved sci-fi actor who is trying to get away from the limelight of being a Star Trek actor or a sci-fi actor. So he's playing a satire of that. But they actually like filmed some of it at San Diego Comic-Con and stuff. It's pretty funny. So I think I like his sense of humor, and I like his choice of roles a lot of the time. I think I would probably follow him to almost any project he's working on, just so that I really enjoy his work.
Cool. All right. And here's more about Timey's Roku.
Yeah. Yes, this does personally impact me favorably in that HBO Max is finally coming to Roku. The regular HBO Now, HBO Go has been available there, but not Max, because HBO and Roku were fighting over the dollar bills and how they would split up fees and etc. But with no surprise, given that there's, as we record this, roughly a week before Wonder Woman 1984 premieres on HBO Max, I'm guessing that both sides were able to come to an equitable agreement and finally put this silliness behind them. So there you go. I was considering my options.
From now on, Christmas Day will be the day that Wonder Woman comes out in our lore.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it seems quite appropriate here. So yeah, I was considering my options. So why did we put the tree
up in the corner, and why do we put the lights on it? Yeah, because Wonder Woman came out, right? Finally. And the tinsel. Don't forget the tinsel. All right, Jonathan, you can take a break for a few minutes while Jaime and I talk about Tom Cruise.
Oh no, I have some opinions.
Oh, okay.
I'm interested to see. So let's if folks didn't see this flying on the interwebs, particularly Twitter, the Scottish Sun, not the normal Sun, the Scottish Sun is reporting on Tom Cruise's COVID-related rant on set. Apparently he's producing the latest Mission Impossible, and the crew was not following the COVID rules, and he completely went off on them, saying like, hey, there are a lot of jobs here that are at stake. If you mess this up, you are gone, and you're gone, and you're gone. Sort of like an anti-Oprah there. So I will leave this to the panel. Opinions on this particular event.
And you get a pink slip, and you get a pink slip, and you get a pink slip. Yeah, he went off. Like,
yeah, I heard the clip earlier today too. Like, I don't know if you guys listened to it.
Oh yeah, a lot of words we don't use on this podcast.
Yeah, he was very upset. But I mean, it's kind of I mean, you gotta stick to your guns. It's funny. Just speaking of COVID, things. I don't know if you guys watched Saturday Night Live, but last week they had on a country western singer that we talked about who was kicked off the show, or he was taken off the show, and Jack White came and played in his place because he went to a party a couple of nights before, weeks before he was supposed to appear on Saturday Night Live, and I mean, yeah, maybe Tom Cruise was a little Tom Cruise-ish in his reaction, but I think you have to stick to your guns, and there are obviously better ways to deal with this kind of stuff, but I mean, I can't really fault him for. I mean, I know people who regularly talk to people about improperly wearing the masks and standing too close and stuff like that, right? So
yeah, I think in this circumstance too, I'm not a Tom Cruise fan at all. I must admit, I found myself on his turf in his corner for the first time in a long time. I thought to myself, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right, because what his point was you're not just endangering me, you're endangering everybody around here. And it wasn't like he was saying oh, somebody sat in my trailer. It wasn't like he was being a prima donna. He was going off on the fact that these people's poor decisions put everyone at risk. And I thought, yeah, I'm right there with you. Yes, absolutely, we need more people of his clout, maybe not using that language, but we need more people with his clout yelling that. Frankly, the president of the GD United States should have been doing that for the last 9 months. We need people in positions of power and fame and authority to yell as loud as they need to yell to get through to the thick-headed people who make these kind of asinine, selfish decisions, to get it through their thick skulls that they are not just putting themselves at risk, they're putting potentially, lots of other people at risk. And yeah, it's the first and last time you're going to hear it, kids. I think Tom Cruise is right.
And we're going to publish that statement. But wasn't it the premier of Manitoba, who's the governor equivalent, who was on TV a couple of weeks ago saying to people, if you don't get this, you're a bloody idiot. Yeah. And yeah, it's okay to hate me for imposing all these rules on you, but I don't know. It's the whole, I don't have to wear a mask because you tell me I have to wear a mask. Frick you. You're wearing a mask because
thanks, Tom Cruise.
You're protecting. You're not. It's not about your rights. It's about you're protecting everybody else around you. And I get that a lot of people really don't give a rat's ass about the people around them. That's clearly, clear by the fact that they refused to wear a mask, right? Or that their puppet president was, had the election stolen away from him because the other guy got more votes. Give me a break. Anyway, but I mean, there ought to be a law, and in fact, I think there is a law. I keep seeing, people saying, "Can I come back to Canada?" And the reality is, yeah, you can come back to Canada, but you got to sit in a hotel for 2 weeks, till you're clear.
Yep. And we've had that happen. It's starting to get closer to hockey season here in Canada. The World Junior Hockey Championships are coming up, and the Canadian team has been incredibly cautious. So they've been testing them multiple times a day, and they've had a couple of positive tests. And as soon as they get a positive test, they shut down the entire camp for 2 weeks, and then they come back and they start again. And they had another few positive tests a few days later, and they shut down the entire camp again. But by the time they get to the actual tournament, hopefully they'll have no issues whatsoever. Whereas some of the other teams haven't been quite as stringent, and now the tournament is only a week away, and they are going to have to miss the tournament because they haven't been doing their quarantines properly. You can say that it's overcautiousness. You can say that it's some sort of authoritarian rule or whatever it is, but
I mean, more people have died from COVID in the last year than world wars, not quite world wars, but more people died from COVID than 9/11. I'm sorry. Hello.
Yeah. Well, that's what they said. So I think it was last week was the first first time that more people died in a single day in just the United States of COVID than died on 9/11. And it's going to be that for a minimum of the next 3 to 6 months, every single day. And that's just in the United States. Like,
we're up around 2,000 a day in Canada, right?
Yeah, this is to be taken seriously.
I know that's a week in Seattle, but that's,
but no, again, I think I'm not on Tom Cruise's corner most of the time, but here I'm right with him.
He's never in Tom Cruise's corner. He never is. I mean, he'll have to be in a hospital bed strapped down before he'll let us put a Tom Cruise movie on, and we'll have to sew his eyes open.
Yeah, have you seen Clockwork Orange? Think that.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
I think the last Tom Cruise movie I saw was, and without exaggeration, over 20 years ago.
What was it?
I think it was The Last Samurai. Is that what it's called?
You saw that?
I did, and I think maybe it was because you maybe have rented it or something. I think that's why I watched it. I think that was the last thing I saw, and I was like, yeah, I'm out. I'm good. I'm out.
Yeah.
But no, I think he's got a point, and I think if, obviously, there are better ways to deal with your coworkers. However, everything he said is absolutely true. People need to smarten up, and they have to stop treating their fellow human beings so poorly.
Yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, for those around who look at Tom Cruise, I mean, I like his movies. I do not agree with his politics and his choice of, worship, in any way. But, I mean, he has done some good movies, I gotta say, Yeah. I watched all of the Mission Impossibles. I was a huge Mission Impossible fan when I was a kid, right? Probably because Leonard Nimoy was in it for a while, right? But, I used to watch that all the time. And the TV show was still better than the movies have been. But, except Simon Pegg's in it, too. And that also makes it good.
Yeah, that's the part that's always been attractive to me, because I know the supporting cast is amazing, and I like a lot of those actors. But
well, I mean, and there's been a lot of. I mean, to talk about Tom Cruise for a minute. I mean, Vanilla Sky is a favorite movie of mine, and so is like I mentioned before, the what's the one, Edge of Tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That one I'll watch whenever it's on. It's just such a good movie. Like, now it could be anybody. Like, anybody could be playing the Tom Cruise character. But yeah, I love those kind of stories where they play with time and it's sci-fi and it's time and whatever. I'm not so big on the aliens, but but I like the concept of how that works, right? So.
I have a dark confession before we leave this bit.
Mm-hmm.
There is one Tom Cruise movie which I do enjoy, and it's only because I love the writing, and it's A Few Good Men.
It's
Aaron Sorkin.
Many times.
It's Aaron Sorkin, and it is the performances are great all across the board. It is an incredibly well written screenplay.
Yeah.
It's directed by Rob Reiner, who does an excellent job with it. I like that movie a lot, and I just try and not to pay attention when Cruise is being Cruise.
Yeah. Well, what's amazing about that movie, that just for a second here, is that the twist that happens at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. There, it's coming, mm-hmm. and every single time, maybe it's Jack Nicholson, maybe it's Aaron Sorkin, or Rob Reiner, but there's something about that delivery of that line. It's like, I can't believe you're saying this.
Mm-hmm.
You freaking idiot.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's such an amazing thing, and of course, Demi Moore's great in it, and Kevin Pollak's great in it.
Yep. Yeah. No, it crackles. So. It's but I'm gonna blow your hair back by mentioning that movie came out almost 29 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I was just looking at the Day of the Doctor when we were talking about Matt Smith. Day of the Doctor is where we had the War Doctor as well as David Tennant. I like the stories where there's more than one Doctor in them, because that's kind of twisty sort of timey-wimey stuff, right? 2003.
Yeah. Crazy.
So, long time ago.
Yeah.
Anywho. All right. Are we there yet?
We're there.
I think so.
Is it time? It's time to talk about Mandalorian. Yay, Mandalorian.
All hail the Emperor.
Yeah. Like I said every week, this is the part of the show where we talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Not episode 20. Episode 10.
Episode 10.
Yeah, it's a typo here. Who did that?
I think the 20 was for this very show and not
I know,
the
but
Star Trek
it says,
Discovery show.
I'm looking at the part where it says main, it says Season 3, Episode 20, but it's after Episode 10, for those of you who think you missed, 10 episodes. Terra Firma Part 2. And I think this is Jaime's turn to do the recap.
That's right.
recappy stuff.
That's right. We begin with a really nifty fly-through of the ISS Discovery. Kind of neat seeing the camera fly through and see the repairs going on, and then sort of take us in from underneath. Instead of coming from the top, it's kind of like you're coming from the bottom, so to speak, and go through. And we catch up to see what's been going on since the first part of this two-parter. We see Michael Burnham, mirror Michael Burnham, being dragged to the brig and begging for honorable death. Of like, what are you doing here? You know I'm supposed to be killed, right? I don't want to. Basically, she doesn't want to go into the agonizer because she surely knows that's what's coming if she's not going to get killed right away. And she's just ragging on Georgiou. It's like, look, everyone can see how weak you've become. Why do you think Lorca's been successful? Why do you think there's this whole groundswell of people looking to overtake you? And she's like, look, you're even like retiring to this palace in the sky, right? Talking about the Karen, the big ship that was being christened. And Georgiou was like, look, no, this palace in the sky is what gives us hope. So we don't have to squash so many rebellions out there, right? Basically like a big show of force. Michael's like, look, there's this whole coalition that's forming, and it's coming to destroy us, to destroy the Terran Empire. And that's not convincing enough. They end up throwing Michael in the agonizer, and Georgiou has what's probably one of the better sort of learnings from this episode. It feels like it's very applicable. So not a parent here, but kind of curious on the parental perspective of why won't they listen to what I say? Why do they only learn from pain?
Yep.
Feels like that's true.
Fall on her face, man.
Amen, sister.
That pot is hot. Don't touch that pot. Oh, you burned yourself. Well, you learned from the pain.
This pot, I won't hurt myself. I've been told stories about a young man who did that once.
That person was a fool, whoever it was.
So we go into a different scene here where Killy, as I will refer to Mirror Universe Tilly, Killy asks Georgiou, like, why the heck is Michael still alive? You're supposed to be killing her. And Georgiou is basically saying, well, because it's very simple and easy to kill someone, but bending them back to your will is totally different. It's a different show of force. So your task is to break her, or I will demand to know why you haven't. And we go into the really nifty, cool Mirror Universe intro for the show, which is blue and upside down, if you all noticed.
Yeah, that was very... At first I thought it was a completely new intro, and then after a few seconds I realized, oh, no, they've just flipped it. Very weird.
Yeah, they flipped it and tinted everything blue to give us the indication that we're hanging out here in the Mirror Universe. So that was kind of a cool one-off there.
Yeah.
So coming back from the intro, we've got Killy taunting Michael, kicking like food through the electronic doors or bars, if we're going to call them that, the force fields, and says, look, your mother is too soft-hearted. I basically would have just killed you immediately. So they throw Michael in the agonizer again, and then they're like, hey, why don't you sleep in there? And apparently they do this because they make Michael sleep in there and then surprise her by turning it on in the middle of the night, which is all sorts of messed up.
and they were having a good time doing it too.
Yeah, and they've got even Dr. Culber here who's like, oh, Michael has passed out from the pain. That's all right. We got a hypo spray to wake her back up to feel more pain. It's hella messed up.
We can fix that.
Exactly. So after the bad times have occurred, Detmer comes to visit Michael, and Michael's like, look, man, they're listening, so you better be real careful with whatever you say, right? Like, don't give yourself up. So really indicating to us that Detmer was definitively part of the attempted coup on Georgiou. And the news comes here that no one's heard from Lorca, right? Like, you might think he's gonna white knight his way in here, but look, dude, he ain't coming. So we end up with Georgiou talking to Michael. She believes she can change, right? And she ends up... this is when Michael is passed out, isn't it? That's right. I don't think this is a conversation, right? This is where her just sort of in the cell with the passed out or sleeping Michael. Is that right? Anybody remember? All right. Well, never mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she's lying there and she's talking about her night vision or night terrors and whatever.
Yeah. She's saying...
I think Michael wasn't really sleeping because she,
Yeah, I was kind of... away thinking she wasn't sleeping either, but then she came out of her sleep a little bit more sleepy than I had thought she might be. So I got a little confused on that one. But either way, she's talking to a supposedly sleeping Michael, telling her about how when she was young, when Michael was young, that is, she would have these nightmares. And eventually Giorgio just let her sleepwalk, and she ended up walking to a field of fireflies, and she would self-soothe, and she'd do this kind of on a recurring basis. And Giorgio leaves her with a nice little bowl of fireflies, kind of a cute motherly thing. Michael wakes up and eats some bread, so finally eating some of the food, even though she had refused it for quite some time throughout these different cutscenes. And she is brought to see Giorgio, and she apologizes and says she can change her traitorous ways. And Giorgio's like, that's cool. All right, well, you know what you got to do, right? You got to kill all the traitors. And oh, by the way, Detmer can help you with this. So we see Mirror Landry sashaying through the hall. She gets attacked by Detmer. Some pew pew pews happen. She kind of gets away until she runs down the hall, and Michael just takes her out. So it was definitely a trap there.
How many times has Rekha Sharma died on this show?
Yeah, that's 3 by my count.
Yeah. How are they going to bring her back next time?
I admire her for coming back just to be in a couple of scenes in this crossover and then get snuffed. Like, that is commitment to your character. Mm-hmm. Or they cut her a humongous check. One of those.
Well, yeah.
So we don't see the like full scenes of these going on. It's kind of heavily implied because we've got a collected group in the conference room here, and Michael throws all the badges at the dead. She names some of them. She names Landry, throws a badge. Price throws a badge, and then throws a whole bunch more and says, and all the rest. And Giorgio's like, that's not all. And Michael sort of takes the hint and just stabs Detmer, just like right dead, right there, like finishing off the last of the traitors, the non-Michael traitors.
Yeah, hardcore.
Yeah. And so you end up with the mother-daughter dinner where they eat and talk about the lack of the KFC surushi. Like, it's not on the menu. Oh, well, it's so, what'd she say? It's so
high in cholesterol.
Fattening? Yeah, there you go.
High in
cholesterol. That's right. And kind of gristly, right?
Yeah, and she says, oh, yeah, it's stringy. And she says, oh, I was in my cell. I was really craving some ganglia. Gross. Right. So gross.
Yeah. Apparently, Giorgio was able to use some back channels to destroy this supposed coalition from within. Typical getting people to distrust each other sort of thing. And yeah, it's like, look, do you still love Lorca? What's going on? Are you going to be able to make the right choice here with him? And then Michael proclaims, oh yeah, she's totally, ready to end this man, given the opportunity, right? Like, you can trust me, mother, sort of stuff. And we end up with a different scene with Saru. He's brushing Giorgio's hair. He's, as you might recall from the first parter, he's her personal attendant here, as Giorgio saved him from getting killed by Michael for rather minor inconveniences. And she tells him, like, he's to remain with her instead of returning to service with Michael. And he's like, unfortunately, I can't. The Vaharai is coming for me, so I would like for you to cull me and put me out of my misery. And Giorgio says, no, it's not true. The Vaharai is not a time for your people to be culled. Actually, what you need to do is get yourself into a locked room somewhere and just suffer through it, and you will be even grander than you might have thought. In fact, I knew somebody. His name was Saru, which confused me a little bit. And I said, oh wait, he probably doesn't have a name in this universe, if I recall. He's just like a pet, or cattle rather. Not even a pet, cattle. Yeah. He tells him about this guy, a Kelpian she knew named Saru, and that's how she knew about the Vaharai, and he became even more powerful and eventually a Starfleet or starship captain. And Saru's like, you're not Terran, right? Because you're not speaking at all like a Terran. She's no, I've seen a different way, and trust me on this. This is better.
And that was a good moment too, just him calling her out and saying, you're not a Terran anymore. That was the first, and they repeated it over the episode, but that she doesn't belong anymore, that she isn't who she was when she left. And that was a really good web that weaves through this whole episode.
Agreed. And it becomes more important towards the end of the episode that we'll definitely talk about. So somewhere in here, the note had come, I think probably the discussion with Michael about how Lorca has been using this code name Vicar when he is communicating surreptitiously, and the ISS Disco crew has discovered that a message was sent to Vicar. And we end up with Killy in command and Nielsen at the con. They warp over to go find this person named Duggan, I forget how his name's pronounced. They're like, all right, let's pew 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 him a little bit to disable his ship. They get him on the comms, and apparently he has been rallying the Klingons and Romulans against the Empire. And Georgiou's like, that's silly. They hate each other. He's like, well, they hate you much more than they hate each other. That's what's happening here. So they beam Dugan over to the brig. He is immediately killed by Michael, and whoa, betrayal here. Michael pulls a weapon on Georgiou, and other people are involved as well in this whole betrayal. So it's a whole coup going on here, right? But who should come to the rescue, so to speak, is Killy's Kelpian Core, as I spelled with all K's here, which kind of fits a little bit with the. We'll talk a little bit about like the Nazi or Hitler sort of themes here, especially related to Georgiou. But they come in to fight. Eventually, Michael ends up getting stabbed by Georgiou, but Georgiou also had gotten injured as well, and she's bleeding out. And we discover that Saru in this universe has actually passed the Vaharai, so he was definitely a beast, picking up somebody and flinging him at the ceiling sort of stuff. So he was kicking some butt, sort of changing the world here. And as Georgiou is dying, she returns to what seems to be the real world, and they're back with the Doctor Who guy and Michael. And it turns out that the change has occurred such that the newspaper he showed up, which previously showed that Georgiou had died on a very specific date, which was, I think, tomorrow's newspaper, if I'm not mistaken, now shows that there's basically no fate but what we make, right? The future is unclear. And Georgiou's like, what the hell? Like, I was in the mirror universe for months. And Michael's like, no, you passed out for like a minute. What are you talking about? But they checked the little wrist device, and it did in fact record months of data. And it's like, whoa, what the heck's going on here? Georgiou does another one of those like glitchy pain things, and they're like, all right, Doctor Who guy, who the heck are you? And he says, I am the guardian of forever.
And we all went, aha!
Yeah, I want to take a little...
And the portal from the TOS shows up, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like we need to take 30 seconds here for Tim to explain, because what I remember, which I'll start off with, what I remember is the big portal, and I think McCoy runs in there for reasons that are like he's drunk or something.
He gets a fever and he's all out of himself, and he jumps through, and then Kirk and Spock jump through to try. They go back into the past, and they end up in Earth.
1930.
Because they jump through at different times, Kirk and Spock end up in like the 1920s America about a week before McCoy shows up. 1930, yeah, and that's the one with Edith Keeler Must Die.
Yep.
I forget if that's the name of the episode or not, but
it is in fact not. It's called The City on the Edge of Forever.
Right. Yeah, and that's with Joan Collins from Dallas.
No. Dynasty.
Dynasty, yeah, sorry, Dynasty, and
that's Harlan Ellison. That was Harlan Ellison's famous episode.
Yeah,
the much loved sci-fi author.
Oh, really? You wrote that one? Yeah. Cool. So, wait, what was your question, Jaime?
Well, I vaguely remember. So here's my remembrance. So McCoy is drunk or something, goes into the portal, ends up going back in time.
He's having a drug reaction.
Okay, so that makes sense. But I'm just going off of my vague memory. Like, how would I describe it with no Google? I was like, all right. And then I think he like falls in love with a nurse or something, and they save her from some accident. But it turns out because of that, Hitler takes over the world. So they're like, dude, she has to die. It's so sad, but for this woman has to die so that Hitler doesn't take over. Is that about right?
Yep.
Spock starts to use the tricorder, of course. She runs a soup kitchen, and Kirk and Spock end up working in the soup kitchen, and Spock keeps stealing all this or acquiring all this electronic gear to the point where he's got his whole room wired up to be the equivalent of a tricorder, and he's got a little TV tube, and he can see into the future. He can read through some sort of timeline he can read, and he sees there's two possible outcomes. One is that things go back to normal, and the other one is that, Germany wins the war and all that kind of stuff. And, we can't, as Americans, have that, right? So we have to solve that problem. And it turns out that as Spock is sort of calculating over time, he figures out that Edith Keeler is in the newspaper, and the turning point is her death.
Yeah.
And so McCoy literally shows up on one side of the street, and Kirk and McCoy are on the other side of the street, and Kirk and Spock. And Edith Keeler sees them and starts to run across the street and gets hit by a car. But as she's running across the street, McCoy and Kirk and Spock see that she's going to get killed or hit by this car, and McCoy starts to run out and try and save her, and Kirk grabs him and holds him back and lets her die. Yeah. And then, of course, McCoy's like, "What are you doing, man?" He's still in his feverish state, right? Mm-hmm. And he can't understand why on earth Kirk would let this happen that way, right? So, but yeah, it was sort of like the beginning of this. The beginning of the show was, I just watched it a few weeks ago, which is why it's so clear in my memory. But at the beginning of the show, it was almost like I thought I was watching Naked Time for a minute, because people were getting infected by touching each other. Again, perfect 2020, storyline, right? Yeah. And McCoy is treating these people, and he gets the sweat or whatever it is on him, so he gets infected with this space virus and gets this space fever, and he ends up beaming down to the planet somehow and getting into and jumping through this portal, right? Yeah. So
it's an all-time classic original episode, and it's actually, if you sort of trace it back, it really is the origin of the idea of the good of the many versus the good of the one, right?
Yeah.
That really is the first part where Star Trek really hit on that as a theme, that in order for millions to live, this person has to die. Yeah. And it was very poignant. It was, it's an all-time classic for a reason.
And if I remember correctly, that portal talks, right?
It does. Yes.
Yeah, it kind of glows as it talks. And in fact, I think in the animated series, they also brought that same portal back for another episode, right? So it's not the only time they've ever done this kind of thing in Star Trek, but because there was one where they land on a planet where the one I was talking about last week was with Mary Hartley, where Spock and McCoy end up going back in time by mistake to like prehistoric times, and because it's prehistoric, Spock as a Vulcan starts to devolve into a more barbaric state.
That's, right? Yesteryear. That's another one.
Yeah, another great one. Yeah. So,
and there's actually a really good, if anybody wants to dig into it, maybe I'll paste it into the show notes. Memory Alpha, which we've talked about before, has a really nice recap of the episode, and it also has a lot of little behind the scenes details. One of the questions was put to it, well, the timing of this, obviously this was, the mid 60s. Was this all a parallel for the Vietnam War? And the writer, or one of the producers said, of course this was a parallel for the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So, its poignance knows no bounds, apparently.
Yeah. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, they used to do things like, Kirk would kiss Uhura, or, he would have some sort of racy scene, or there would be some sort of thing that they would, a scantily clad woman, to get the censors to sort of get all riled up and miss the fact that the story was an anti-war theme, right? Kind of thing. The writers on the show used to do that, and Roddenberry used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, back to today's show, Jaime.
No, I thought this was useful because I even I was like, all right, I kind of remember the Garden of Forever from that episode. I didn't get things correct, but I was like, oh, at least I knew enough to say, all right, I see how this episode is going to end.
I was waiting for him to say I'm Q.
That was really, a possibility, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a possibility. It seemed like those two were the obvious. If they were going to tie it into something we knew, those made sense.
Yeah. Yep.
I'd have loved it if it was Delancey had just shown up. That would have been amazing. Would have been amazing.
Yeah, when they said there's this life form down on the planet, or something like that. When they first in the first part, if they had beamed down and it was Delancey sitting in there with the bowler hat on. Oh my God. He's got to show up at some point, I'm sure, right?
I wonder if he was just the personal torment of Jean-Luc Picard. I honestly hope if he's gonna come back, he comes back in Picard, because really it was the dynamic between those two the performers was so good.
Right. So they tease us with that reveal that he's the Garden of Forever with the portal. we go back over to the disco, the Prime Universe disco, and Adira and Stamets are trying to figure out the signal. They're like, all right, how come we're not able to, just patch in to the ship that's supposedly there? Like, we know it's a Starfleet ship. We know which ship it is. We should be able to connect. And Jet Reno comes in, not happy with the power drain that they're using because they're really maxing things out, trying to connect that other ship in the Verubin Nebula. And Book comes in and says he has an answer. It's an emerald chain tool.
Wait, you got to talk about the licorice.
Yeah, the licorice.
You want to explain? You want to explain the licorice thing and how it's
sure.
a snack?
When Jet Reno's there, standing explaining to Stamets and Adira, is Adira her name? She's chewing on a piece of licorice, and Adira says, "You can't have food in here." She says, "It's not food; it's candy. This is like it's sort of a accessory kind of deal, right?" And then when Book walks in a few minutes later, he looks at her and just offhandedly says, "You can't have food in here."
Well, but it's funnier too because he says, "I've been reading all these manuals. You're not allowed to have food in here."
Yeah. He's definitely taking the you got to do things by the book, no pun intended. You got to read the manual sort of thing.
So he brings his 23rd century mesh Wi-Fi router, right?
Yeah. It's this whole emerald chain tool, possibly malware that the couriers know about of how to use this, and that can be useful to boost things so they can work through, and it does. And Stamets can't find a way to say thank you, which Reno's like, yeah, it will physically hurt him to say thank you. So that's sort of just the way his personality is. We go back down to the planet. We learned that the Guardian was tired of being used to try killing other people within the Time Wars, and he left that location that he was at and basically tried to hide away. But the sphere data sort of came in handy in being able to extrapolate where this guy might have gone, or this entity might have gone, given what it knew about his past dealings as well as access to the Federation database. And he says to Georgiou, like, you weren't sent back to be cured. To be really clear, you were sent back to be weighed, try to get the measure of a person. And she's like, all right, I failed. Everything turned out the same, right? Still ended up killing Michael, and things went bad. And he's like, yeah, that's true. But you're in a different situation. The key difference here is you tried, right? You tried to change, tried to be better than where you were, and you basically just didn't fit in. As Saru had mentioned, she didn't fit in as a Terran anymore. And he says, well, what I can do is I can send you back to when the Prime and Mirror universes were closer together, so you won't end up with that time sickness and universe sickness double problem that she had. And Michael's like, all right, well, I'm going to come along. And he's like, no, Michael can't come along. She's right where she needs to be. She needs to be here doing what she's doing now. And this ends up with a very sad goodbye between Georgiou and Michael, where it's like, you are my Philippa, right? You're not just the mirror version of my Georgiou. You're definitely my Georgiou, right? They've got the whole mother-daughter thing going on, and Georgiou mentions this person who was very, very dear to her called San, and as folks might recall, that was the name that she was sort of screaming when she was having those terrible sort of flashbacks that we had seen. And the Guardian Forever says, no, this is not the Guardian Forever. This is Georgiou giving Michael advice. She's like, look, this era that we find ourselves in is more Terran, so you might want to consider being captain, because as well as Saru has done, he's going off of a playbook that works better in a more civilized time. And you end up with Georgiou walking through the looking glass, so to speak, going through the portal. Mm. Yeah,
into a spin-off series to be named later.
Yeah. It does seem like it's this two-parter was the backdoor pilot, as they like to call it, the pilot within another show for an upcoming show. Given that it's
time tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, we had speculated like, hey, what's going to happen? Like, oh, maybe the Discovery will go back in time and Georgiou will like fall out the window or something and be kind of like what's his name, Loki, when he fell off of the sky bridge and ended up in a completely different area, right? The Bifrost, there you go. I couldn't remember what the sky bridge is called. So we go back to Saru, who's updating Admiral Vance on the Kelpian connection. He is Admiral Vance is worried about using Emerald chain tech on a Federation ship because it's a risk, right? It could be, like
that
malware
aspect you were talking about.
Yeah. But they get some assurances that things will be fine. Book can vouch for this sort of thing. Book leaves the conference room, and Admiral Vance is like, so what's up? You didn't tell me about this thing immediately. You've gone through this, almost 1,000-year journey to get here. You haven't seen a Kelpian in a very long time. I could totally understand if you were a little bit distracted. And they're like, no, totally fine. It's okay. There's no distraction here. I just didn't want to bother you with minor details until we had figured out what to report. And Vance is like, my condolences on your ship's lost. You've lost a crewman who's very important to your crew. I guess this is where Book takes off, where he goes to see Michael of like, only Michael is returning from the planet, which is not good news if Georgiou is not there, right? And they end up having this discussion about that, and I think Michael goes to talk to Saru, if I'm not mistaken here, and talks about, so she's gone, and Michael's like, yeah, she's gone, like deceased? No, she's gone. All right, well, she's not going to return. It is as if she is dead. So they treat it that way, and the crew does a toast to Georgiou, and Michael talks about how this was a person who she loved very much and hated very much, and sometimes both of those feelings at the same exact time. And kind of seems like we end with Michael maybe getting a little bit of closure on both Georgious, right? Both her original Philippa Georgiou as well as Mirror Universe Georgiou. This is where we end the episode.
So yeah, it kind of gets a little bit lost in the shuffle, and I thought it was interesting because the first episode, the first part of this two-parter, sort of was interesting in that it wove together the A plot and the B plot, with the A plot being what's going on with Georgiou and that, and the B plot was they're still working on the mystery of the nebula. This one starts very deeply in the Terran universe, and I wasn't sure that they were going to come back from that, but then it does circle back to the mystery of the nebula later in the episode to sort of continue advancing that plot. It did feel mildly disjointed that way.
Yeah.
Like it was hard to care or feel invested, really, even though that is the sort of central plot that's been tying together the last handful of episodes, because they were sort of giving you so much of the Georgiou, Terran stuff, what's going on there, and then the mystery of how did she get there, what is it? It really did kind of diminish the overarching plot. Maybe when you watch it as a sort of a back-to-back-to-back in a streaming, when the whole series is done, or the whole season is done, and you can sit and watch the whole thing, maybe it'll flow better, but it felt a little disjointed in this way. Yeah,
I think once we were in the Mirror Universe, we should have just stayed there for the duration, right?
Or just come back to the planet, right?
Yeah, I mean, they should have just, maybe that the section in the middle was a bit sort of lower decks-ish, we're really following the people in the lower decks, and what the captain's doing up on the bridge is sort of a side story sort of thing, right? And that's how it sort of felt.
Yeah, and it was funny too, because the Terran stuff was, it starts out with torture, it is about, interrogation, betrayal, all these things, and then they cut to like kind of a goofy scene in the one we talked about with the licorice, right? Like it felt a little incongruous, and maybe it was to try and relieve some of the tension of that, like maybe that was what they were trying to do, but it didn't, I think, hold together quite as well as I would have hoped for. You guys disappointed Lorca never showed up?
I was a little bit, because they teased so much. If they had casually mentioned him, I wouldn't have been disappointed, but I thought, oh man, heck, as you guys mentioned, they brought back Landry, and like, they probably threw a little bit of money and say, hey, are you going to be in town? Okay, we'll go shoot something with you then,
and beyond bringing back Landry, they brought back Ariam. Did you notice this?
Yeah, there was another actor playing Ariam.
That's the actor. That the one who played her in after Sarah Mittich did. That's Hannah Cheeseman, who was also from Toronto. Hannah Cheeseman came back and played Ariam without the prosthetics.
Yeah, no, but Ariam was. Wait a minute. Ariam is the
in the Terran universe. Ariam doesn't have the augmentation because she never suffered that accident.
Yeah, but Sarah Minnich was originally Ariam.
I know, but in this iteration, they had her, now that she's an established character, as Lieutenant Nilsson. She was playing Lieutenant Nilsson, who meets a rather grisly fate later in the episode by getting shot in the forehead by Tilly or Killy.
Yeah.
But in one scene, there's a close-up. You can see it full on. It's Hannah Cheeseman as Ariam, and they say Ariam by name. And it's the actress who played her during her last iteration in last season.
Oh, you mean the one that sacrifices herself?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that wasn't Sarah Minnich?
No. Okay. Remember they recast her for the second season.
Oh, for second season, right. Yes,
they hired another Toronto actor named Hannah Cheeseman. She came in and played her while they moved Sarah over to being Lieutenant Nilsson, and then they killed off Ariam, but they brought her back. That actress came back and played herself, but without the prosthetics, which I could understand why it would be hard to sort of know. I just happen to know what she looks like. But so again, dedication to the craft. They brought her back as the actual same actress to come back and do that. I thought that was a nice touch. Although, again, you'd have to know what you were looking at, right? Like, they mentioned her by name, but you wouldn't necessarily look at her and be like, oh, that's clearly the actress who played, like you'd have to see a picture side by side to know that was her, actually the same actress.
Yeah. Well, they did the same thing with the Mirror, when they first went to the Mirror Universe in season 1, where they brought back some of the people that they killed on the original ship, right? With Michael Burnham.
Yep, on the Shinjo.
When she did her bad thing, right?
Yep. So. Also, are you guys a little disappointed or at all disappointed that we didn't get to the mystery of who or what San is?
No.
I mean, obviously they're carrying that over. They want you to feel invested, so you'll go watch the JoJo series, and there maybe we'll get more details.
Oh, is there going to be a JoJo series? Is that why we're writing her off?
Yeah, that was always it's always been in the offings before they even announced Picard and all these other ones. That was one of the first things they announced, was they were going to develop a Section 31 spin-off series centered around JoJo. What I'm really curious about now is she going back to the era that they left in? Is she going to a different time period? Where are they going to drop her in Star Trek continuity to have her take that on, which is a really interesting new sort of wrinkle too. I think we always assumed she would be at the beginning where they left.
Yeah, I was just channel flipping today, and Quantum Leap came on, so I watched a little bit of that episode. Maybe they'll do a sort of JoJo and Quantum Leap kind of story.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they
popping into people's lives.
Yeah,
right?
It'd be interesting to see who they could cross her over with. I mean, I personally, I would love it if they would cross her series into like Picard or something, right? Like, have her show up in that time period, and she's the head of Section 31 in his future,
Yeah, so can we talk about some of the continuity stuff again? So I thought it was really amazing that Giorgio and, the people who weren't Burnham could walk through the force field.
Yeah.
Right. And I always go back to the brig in the original series, which of course comes after the Enterprise is after the Discovery, right? Mm-hmm. How come Kirk and Spock couldn't walk through those things?
Yeah.
Right. In either of the universes, because even in the one with what's his name, Cumberbatch, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have him in the prison, and they have to use like a tool to pass things through the glass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the force field or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Just
I hand wave it as the Discovery is very specifically an experimental science ship. Maybe they get all the cool concept car stuff before anybody else.
Yeah, but it's like comparing the ISS to the Apollo missions, right?
But if we're going to start pulling threads, why the hell would there be a science vessel in the Terran universe?
So I have an answer for that one, right? Because it's like the mad science one. It's like we come up with new exotic ways to use agonizer technology, right? Like that's their whole job. Figure out new ways to kill and maim and torture.
I guess that's it. Yeah.
So for me, I'd mentioned this in our chat of like, I want to make sure we talk about on the show that there are folks that are like, hey, how come the crew is like cheering what is to these particular fans the equivalent of Space Hitler? And for me, I'm like, that analogy doesn't really work. I think Mirror Universe JoJo is kind of closer to like space Joseph Stalin, right? The brutal dictator head of the USSR, which I mean, there was a whole bit in Friends in like the 90s of like trying to convince Joey to call himself Joe Stalin.
That's right.
Which you would never hear as a joke, is like, call yourself Adolf Hitler, right? And so I think it's a less visual reaction. I think it's probably more accurate, of like less sort of cartoony in terms of being evil, and more being a more gray person, right? Like, let's not forget, in World War II, the USSR, and therefore Joseph Stalin, was fighting on the side of ostensibly the good guys, right? Working with the Allies. And I think it's probably a closer thing, where it wasn't as if everybody was necessarily hanging out with Giorgio for giggles and grins. It was like kind of out of necessity, given what had happened. And I think you can build bonds with folks, even folks who aren't that good as individuals. And I think, as this episode showed, it's like, well, she was definitely rough around the edges. We might argue about like, well, she kind of had to be, because you show weakness, you're dead in her universe. So I don't think it's quite accurate to say space Hitler. How could they approve of this person? I'm like, I can't imagine that like Churchill and Roosevelt were all that jazzed about having dinner with Stalin, but at the very sense, they could still see this person as an ally and maybe as an individual, and not just a cartoony antagonist.
Yeah. And I think we touched on it a little earlier, and you touched on it some more, Jaime. The whole point of this two-parter was to show that this is not the same person we met in the Terran universe in season 1, who was committed to being the person that she was. This person who didn't see any other path and was just, a monster. And her time with Michael, and her time in the Prime universe, and her time getting to know these people, clearly had changed who she was. And that's, it's, I guess, supposed to be yet another one of those reflections on the high-mindedness of this concept of Star Trek, that they can find a better way, they can find a peaceful way, they can find a way to sort of make things better by their innate goodness and goodwill.
Right.
Yeah.
A good episode.
Yeah. I do think you guys are right that it probably would work better if they had sort of reshuffled so that the signal information was a completely different episode and not interspersed with this two-parter. I do think that, although we do know that there was supposed to be a Section 31 based show coming up, given that the Guardian of Forever is involved here, it doesn't necessarily have to be, or it could be, and a completely different time, and other things. There's all sorts of things that they could just have bought themselves some flexibility by having the character bow out of this series in this particular way.
It is bittersweet too. We were thinking about it from a character perspective. Obviously, it does change the dynamic a little bit. Michelle Yeoh's been a fun character to have around. She is the truth speaker. She is the cynic.
She's a Bond girl.
She is. Well, yeah. I mean, again, she's 60 something, and she's still beautiful and amazing actress. But yeah, she's really been a sort of welcome bit of cynicism in this wide-eyed optimistic world too. She is the counter Tilly, right? Tilly is like, it's gonna be great, and she's the one who's like, no, it's not. I guess we still have that in Tig Notaro, but she's certainly not quite as defeatist as blunt as the Emperor was. Her not being on the show anymore is a bit of a loss. I'm sure that there will be other characters that will develop and everything else, but she's been great, and it is sad to see her leaving Discovery. Obviously, the potential is she's going to go off and do this spin-off series, and maybe that'll be great on its own, but losing her from Discovery after 3 years is it's bittersweet.
Let's do the I was just thinking what you should do in the watch list, because we are running short of time here, but let's just jump into the watch list, because I'm sure we'll divulge into the Mandalorian as part of his pick here. So what's your pick today, Joan?
This week we got our first look at Disenchantment Season 3. This is the Matt Groening created series for Netflix. It is it's probably one of the darker things I guess he's done, but it's obviously Simpsons and Futurama. This is his sort of take on, a medieval life. It focuses on the princess, who is, not exactly in the perfect princess mold. We've got, her companions are, a demon and an exiled elf, and it's funny. I must admit, I really like that show. The voice actors are great, the jokes are funny, and it's really had a bit of an arc over the first 2 seasons. So we got to look at season 3. The first trailer dropped. It's coming, they've got an announced date. It's coming in mid-January, and it's a good show, and I'm definitely looking forward to digging into season 3. They did leave on a bit of a what's going to happen next kind of storyline, not quite as big a cliffhanger as season 1 to 2, but I'm curious to see where the story goes and to dive back in with those characters.
Yeah, good to know. I've not delved into it yet, but I guess obviously I have a reason to watch it now. So.
Yeah, it's worthwhile. It's not heavy fare by any means. You know, it is very digestible, and you know, it's humorous. It's, you know, it's got some drama, but it's definitely, you know, lots of humor mixed in there, lots of good characters, and just so many good voices. You'll recognize most of the voices as you go through it, and they're just perfect fits. So yeah, definitely worth a watch on Netflix.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that it's more serialized than you would think. I thought it was maybe episode of the week sort of thing, more Futurama-y, and it's actually got it takes most of the first season for like, oh, okay, I totally see the storyline here, and the second season carries on for that first season storyline.
Yeah. What were your impressions, Jaime? Did you like it?
I did. It took me a little bit of a while to get into it, and funny enough, that sort of tells us like how life was different. It was my air travel show, so I load up like, you know, 4 or 5 episodes and watch them on planes.
And I did the exact same thing.
Yeah, it was very digestible for that situation. And then I think for the second season, I was like, all right, I'm just going to start watching these straight through here and follow through.
Nice, cool. All right, I'm going to do my pick first so that we can spend some time on Mandalorian. But I just happened to be flipping by YouTube today, and I saw a blooper reel. I think it was from season 5 of The Next Generation. And The Next Generation has always seemed to me a very stiff show. Like they have funny moments in the movies and things like that, but on the TV show, Patrick Stewart is very stiff, and everybody's very serious, and Data's always very robotic and all that kind of stuff. And you know, other than Jonathan Frakes, you know, and he seems to have fun with things on the show, but everybody's like really sort of uptight on the Next Generation Enterprise, right? So it was interesting to watch bloopers. I've never actually sat down and watched a blooper reel of them before, but to see them, you know, as regular people, you know, switching into the character mode and then screwing up and laughing and whatever. So it's really interesting. I'll put a link in the show notes here for the people to sort of check out some of these YouTube clips. But it's if you've never watched a blooper reel of The Next Generation, it's definitely worth watching, because it's just, you know, they strike me as being very different off camera as they are on, right? So I don't know if you guys ever watched the blooper reels in Star Trek?
Oh yeah,
Discover or TNG.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I've seen a few on YouTube, but the thing I've been seeing recently, and I don't know, maybe it's because I watched Star Trek Discovery or something, and the YouTube algorithm says, hey, you want Star Trek content? It's been promoting to me these intakes. So instead of outtakes, which is usually like the blooper reel, this is take the blooper reel cut and insert it into the scene.
Oh,
to hilarious effects. So it's like very serious, and then like Worf cracks or something, or says like blah 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 blah, you know, and it's like he's being hella disrespectful to Captain Picard or something, you know.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's dig in. What do you got for us this week, Jaime?
I have no idea how to talk about this in a unspoilery way, so I made an editorial decision on the title here to say, rather than take the original 9 to 5 Google article, I changed it to be simply character from The Mandalorian is Google Search's latest AR object.
But the link gives it away, though, Jaime.
It does. So this is an audio only. This is an audio only medium. So for those of you transporting at home, you would have to specifically go take a look at the show notes to avoid this. So this is your spoiler warnings. Like the name here is probably not, like, if you've never seen the show, this probably isn't too big a spoiler, because you'd be like, I don't know who the hell this is. I think once you watch like an episode or two, you'll be like, oh, I totally know who this is now. So again, spoilers for that. It is a rather cool AR experience. It works. It didn't seem to work on my iPad. Your iPhone and other mileage may vary. I got it to work on my phone, and I could have this character like right here in my living room or right here on my desk, and it was really freaking cool. It doesn't do a whole lot, but it's definitely pretty neat, and it's kind of a nice melding of the MTJC and Spotcast worlds here.
Now, if only your dog Pollo could experience that, right?
I have not tried. This was new enough to me. I haven't tried this out to just like size compare. I did compare him to like size of an iPad. I got to see size of a Chihuahua to sort of get an indication.
Is he bigger than a bread box?
I don't have a bread box, but I do have an area where we do keep bread, so I could compare for that.
Right. All right. Yeah. So this begs the question. Now that you've seen 2 seasons of,
almost
season and a half of Mandalorian. What do you think?
I think it's really good. I can see why people really like it.
The difference is you binged it, right? Whereas Jonathan and I have had to slowly intake it, right?
Yeah, and I feel like the way you would take it in might change your opinion on things. Certainly, I did not get to participate in the week-to-week, like, oh my god, what just happened there? Especially when they have a kind of cliffhanger type ending. The way we watched it is, I was intending, as folks may remember from this very show, to subscribe as I had planned on December 15th, so that the 1 month trial or 1 month subscription would cover at least the premiere of WandaVision, to decide what we wanted to do, continue forward, or just say, all right, and wait till next time for that. I was planning to just binge this myself over 2 successive nights, and my significant other, who was not interested in The Mandalorian, just to be really clear, this is why I had not subscribed, because, this is just a show for me, maybe if she's not interested, we don't necessarily have to get it. And it was just sort of in the background for her while she was doing other stuff, and I watched a few episodes, and she seemed to watch a little bit more until I got kind of close to the late in night. I was like, I guess I'll stop for the night. This is on episode 7. I would have finished in the first season, and she's like, what? No, let's finish the season. I was like, what? I didn't think you were paying attention. And she really got into it, so we finished it late that night for season 1, and then just went on a crazy binge cycle for season 2 to catch us up to the first 7 episodes of the season. So I'm kind of bummed that we didn't watch the show from the beginning, so I wouldn't be spoiled for a handful of things that I happen to know about going into the seasons. But I was still really, really, really pleased, and really enjoyed how it does have a through line. There are major story points, there are major story arcs. There is some fan servicey stuff that probably would have been really cool to be like on the message boards talking about with folks, but I don't think it needs that, right? Like, I didn't get any of that, and certainly it might have been enhanced by that, but I don't think it needs it. So I think folks can really just go in and binge like I did, and just really enjoy seeing this character, the Mandalorian, like seeing his arc through the seasons, and how he has to sort of come to grips with who he is and what he is, and what are his true principles that he lives by.
Now, how many hours have you watched of this? Like, because I've never really sat down and thought about how long it is.
I didn't look at the running times, but Jonathan was right. Like, they do vary from like 30-ish minutes to 45 to an hour. So, somewhere fewer than
8 or
15.
10 episodes per season.
8.
Yeah, so 8 and 7 so far, with the 8th coming out tomorrow as we record this. So fewer than 15 hours, but not as close to 8 hours as I assumed that the 2 seasons would be. So I guess it's probably 10 to 12.
Watch it. You have to watch it over a couple of days, right?
Yeah. It was. I don't remember the start times, but probably 5 or 6 hours one night, and then probably another 5 or 6 hours the next night.
Yeah.
Right.
So how much had you been spoiled on, and how much was a surprise?
So the major merchandising character was impossible to avoid.
Yes,
so I knew that almost like from like the first or second episode as the memes started hitting the internet. I think I had seen the news of how do we describe this in non-spoiler ways?
A classic character? A
classic character from a fairly recent series that was in this show. I knew that an even more classic character was going to reprise, and was very surprised that a formerly canon in the extended universe canon character name was now it was decanonized once they said, that's all the Star Wars legend stuff, right? It's not canon anymore, and then recanonized. I'm like, holy smokes, this is an emotional journey here. I'm like, this character from a book series that is apparently going to be a key part, if not this season, then maybe next season.
Well, that character actually was canonized in Rebels.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've not watched Rebels, so just continue through from that.
Given how did you watch Clone Wars?
Most of Clone Wars.
Halfway through Clone Wars.
Yeah, about halfway through the original run. I've not seen the final season either.
Right. So Clone Wars definitely delved into the Mandalorian world and the lore and all that stuff. And there was a real sort of through line of the Mandalorians through especially the seasons 2 through 6 of Clone Wars. That really gets picked up in Rebels, because one of the main characters on Rebels is a Mandalorian. And then it really starts to build more and more on what, the culture, the people, the war, all that stuff. And that stuff has carried over. Some of the stuff that's from that has carried over directly, including the weapon that Moff Gideon has, is a huge part of the storyline in Rebels. So the significance of what that is and what it means is really honed in on in that show. So I would say if you have some time over the holidays and you happen to have, say, a subscription to Disney Plus, I would say it is only 4 seasons. There are some episodes of Rebels that are as good as episodes of The Mandalorian. There are episodes of Rebels that are as good or better. Frankly, they're far better than the last 3 Star Wars live action movies. It is a tremendous show. I'm a huge fan of that series, and I would say if you're enjoying Mandalorian, there's a lot of Mandalorian content in those 2 shows that are well worth going back and soaking in.
Yeah, I didn't delve very deep into the Disney Plus UI, but I did notice that their UI has, you can watch Clone Wars, but then there's also like, oh, do you just want to catch up on the major episodes that involve this character? Here's a whole line of episodes you can watch. So that might be a way to catch up too. It's very similar in many respects to what we talked about that they did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you can watch these in release order, you can watch in particular phase 1, 2, or 3, or you can even watch in timeline order. So I'm definitely pretty happy about that. That might make it easier to catch up on certain stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly it can be very daunting too when you're looking at, for people who didn't have a chance to watch Clone Wars and Rebels. Of course, you can catch up with them on Disney Plus, but it is realistically 10 seasons at 20 plus episodes a pop. You have to want to soak that much Star Wars in. Not that it isn't. There are some episodes of Clone Wars in particular. I find there's certainly some throwaway ones in Rebels, although I think Rebels is a much more complete series. It's very compact, but Clone Wars, there's definitely probably about 25% of the episodes that you can just move past unless you're a completist.
Yeah. I did find on the Disney Channel they have a series called the Best of Clone Wars, where they've broken it down to like 20 essential. I think it's like essential Clone Wars ones, right? I tried watching those, but the problem is they don't. It's not like it's not like a playlist where you can just watch those 20. You start watching one and it plays the next one in series. It doesn't like stick to those 20 by themselves, right? So anyway, I usually put that show in the background and just watch it. I think I'm at the end of season 2 or maybe halfway through season 3 or something.
Yeah, and there's some episodes where the concept or the character will drag you in and you'll just sit and watch the whole thing, or a 2 or 3 part story. And there are some where it's just perfect background. I'm looking at stuff on my phone, I'm doing some online shopping, and I'm just sort of kind of paying attention or listening to the episode. There's lots of those. Yeah, I do find that as the series went on, so at the beginning, Dave Filoni you could tell he's got an influence on it, but as he starts to rise in his influence, and Jon Favreau actually is a character on Clone Wars and is sort of central in there, and he's very passionate about the Mandalorian. You can really see it starting to grow momentum, and then they carry that really nicely into from Clone Wars into Rebels, which actually brings back some of the characters from Clone Wars and sort of picks up what happened to them, because it is set 20 years later. It sort of
it's after Return of the Jedi, right?
Rebels is actually the prequel to Rogue One.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So it happens right before A New Hope, and it actually sort of wraps up with a teaser. And actually, if you watch Rogue One, you can see the Ghost, the ship that they fly on in Rogue One, and they mention some of the characters by name, and one of the characters actually makes a cameo in Rogue One as well. So it is canon. Like, this isn't people can poo-poo it as well. It's a cartoon. It's not live action. It's not the same.
Well, stylistically, though, is it similar to Clone Wars, or
stylistically, it is a little less.
It's kind of different.
It's a little. Yeah. I found, especially the first few seasons of Clone Wars, they felt a little
plastic.
Well, a little puerile. Like, it almost felt a little bit aimed at kids, which it probably was, right?
Yeah.
It was probably aimed at that. But in the same way that good fiction evolves, think of Harry Potter. Harry Potter, the first book, is more or less a kid's book. And as the course of J.K. Rowling's writing and also the story evolves and the characters age, the stories become more mature and have more heft. I find that Clone Wars, Rebels, and into the other other stuff is that same evolution where it feels like there's more gravitas to Rebels. Not to say that there isn't some goofiness. There's, there's a little bit of, it's always stuff in there for the kids, as good Star Wars is, right? Good Star Wars plays across a huge swath of demographics. But I found that Rebels had a lot more heft, and it wasn't as shy. Like Clone Wars was sort of, because of when it was set during the prequel era. So there's only so much you can do with that. Yep. It had to sort of exist between episodes 2 and 3. And there really was no wiggle room on that. So there's only so much you can do as far as adding characters and everything else. Well, when you get around to Rebels and it happens 20 years later, there, not to spoil anything, but there are characters from, the original trilogy. There are characters from the prequel trilogy. There are characters from Clone Wars. It is really kind of it's a bit of a Star Wars fan's nerd dream, right? Like it's really ties it all together. And there are some, stupendous action scenes. And, there's one episode particularly, I think might be the culminating episode of season 3 is an hour-long episode or a 2-part episode, I can't remember. And it is for me, it is one of the all-time Star Wars episodes, TV shows, movies. It is stellar Star Wars storytelling. So yeah,
this is Rebels or Clone Wars?
Rebels, yeah.
Rebels. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, to see an entire thing like Clone Wars being made out of a throwaway line from the first movie.
Yeah.
It's just sort of he's just sort of explaining to Luke who his dad was and all that kind of stuff, and you sort of say during the Clone Wars, and all of a sudden that becomes an entire series and something that fans have kind of wondered about. I mean, I like the fact that I gotta say I still like the way that Star Wars, which is now known as A New Hope, tells the story, because as I like to think of it as a standalone movie, right? And the fact that, Obi-Wan, when he's explaining to Luke about his father and about the lightsaber and all that kind of stuff, and, it sort of had a very sort of 30s or 40s or even 50s movies feel to it, where things are just sort of mentioned offhand as if they're matter of fact, and there's no need to go into great detail about it. And yet, here we are, because we're all obsessive. We want, 7 seasons of Clone Wars to sort of explain to us what's going on, So it's interesting, but I find it fascinating that we've actually got 7 seasons of stuff out of something that fell out of Obi-Wan's face, just as what do you call it, where you're describing a character, exposition.
Yeah, it's backstory. It's a backstory and plot exposition, right? Yeah, and it meant nothing. I mean, it was just sort of something that George Lucas put in there as a and in my mind, the Clone Wars is completely different than what is being presented to me, in this show, right? So, I envision it's completely different. Yeah, but it does spill. Again, if you watch that through line, and it's funny because you don't think of there being a through line, but the through line is Dave Filoni, right? Dave Filoni is the through line from Clone Wars to Rebels to this now in live action. And if you think of him as the through line to it, you really start to see it. And they all inform one another. And, there really is a lot of good information to mine from Clone Wars and particularly from Rebels. I would be curious to see if we start, now that we're expanding this time period. So Mandalorian is going to exist in the same time period as, spoilers, Ahsoka and Rangers of the New Republic. Those 3 series are meant to occur in the same time and the same part of the universe. I wonder if we're going to start seeing more characters show up from Rebels because there is a through line there as well. And, I wonder if we're going to start to see it all sort of snowball together and do this big, amazing Star Trek soup.
Yeah, Ahsoka's an interesting character too because she's obviously geared towards the young adult, right?
Yeah, I mean, she was supposed to be the
Utes out there.
Yeah,
right?
she was meant to be the character that young people could identify with in Clone Wars. Hey, if I was a kid who was wanted to be a Jedi, this would be me, and I'd go on these adventures with Obi-Wan and Anakin.
And these are the mistakes I would make, and so on.
Absolutely,
and so forth. Yeah.
But then her story continues through, obviously now all through those different series too, and that's very interesting too.
Yeah. So it's interesting. For me, personal connection is that I saw Dave Filoni speak just before Rebels rolled out.
Oh, was that in San Francisco?
Yeah, I was at WWDC for 2014, and that was the year that Swift was introduced, and that was the year that Dave Filoni did the closing keynote. And they had stormtroopers walking around and standing there guarding the stage, and he talks about his Star Wars collection as a kid and all of his pictures of him opening Star Wars stuff under the tree. story, and he tells a story. I don't know if if you're ready for this yet, Jaime, but there's a behind the scenes making of Mandalorian, and in one of the episodes, Dave Filoni tells the same story he told us back then, was about his first meetings with George Lucas, where a woman called him on the phone and said, he was working with he was in the same animation studio with the people who did SpongeBob SquarePants, right? And so when somebody called him and said, George Lucas wants to meet you, he's like, yeah, right, George Lucas wants to meet me. and he's like, who is this, Joe? Did you, who? And he's like, the whole time he's like, putting this woman off, thinking, really, who's, what's going on? And he actually hangs up and she calls him back, and he goes, and it finally dawns on him that George Lucas really does want to meet me, He's like, oh my God, I'm making a Jedi costume in my garage right now. And he's thinking, like, that's the last thing you should say.
So Jaime, what's next? You've taken the dive, you're into Mandalorian, now you've got this world in front of you for the next 29
Have
days.
you watched The Black Hole yet? That's the first thing I watched on Disney
Rewatch. Yeah, I think as a household we'll end up probably watching Mulan, almost certainly watching Hamilton, and then from there to buy my time until WandaVision comes out, I probably will end up watching Clone Wars. I'll figure out where I stopped on Netflix, more or less, and then start watching from there.
I did watch the Computer War tennis shoes the other day.
Ooh.
Yeah, I haven't seen that since I don't think I've ever really sat down and watched the whole thing.
It's Kurt Russell?
Kurt Russell, yeah. A really, really campy movie.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they've put up a lot of content that's nostalgic, but I think, wow, that will not hold up well.
Well, it's funny though, because and we complain about this, the menu that you get when you go to Prime or you go to Netflix or you go to Disney is, and even Apple to a certain extent, you get in there and you're sort of presented with things. I wonder too if the stuff I see in Netflix is different than the stuff you see on Netflix because of my choices versus yours.
Oh, I'm sure it is, because my wife and I sit down and watch stuff. Sometimes we're watching things on my file and sometimes it's hers, and I see the recommended list. It's completely different, right?
Yeah. So what I've discovered is that if there's a movie I'm interested in seeing, I go into the search panel. I'll start with Netflix, and if it's not there, I'll go over to Prime. If it's not there, I'll go to Disney, and I'll search for this particular movie, and then I'll realize, I can't get it, whatever. But because the problem is with this the way the menu works is it doesn't work for me. Like, the stuff that I go to Netflix and I'll flip through all the new stuff that's in the the new stuff or the trending stuff or whatever. I might find one show that I'll want to stop and watch. Like I never go in there and go, unless it's something like the Queen's Gambit or something that we've talked about on the show, or something that is like anything space related. I generally stop and watch that stuff, right? But and sometimes I cringe. But I find that the search on these apps is just so difficult, right? So
yeah, one thing I will say is the Apple TV iPhone app. If you link that to your other streaming services, which you can, so you can put in your streaming services like Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, Apple TV. I do that on my thing. The only one I can't get in there is Netflix for some reason.
So you do that, if you put all that stuff in as a link to your Apple TV phone app, and then you do a search, it'll tell you all the places you can watch it, including iTunes.
Right.
And I find that very useful.
If you click on it, on the Apple TV, if you click on the thing, like if it's on Disney, it'll flip over to the Disney app, or if it's on or Prime, it'll flip over to the Prime app, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's very convenient. I like that feature.
Seamless. Yeah. Let's see you do that on your Roku, Jaime.
Yeah, it's a decent experience. I haven't seen what it's like on Apple TV. I imagine it looks roughly the same, but some of the fit and finish.
Do you not own an Apple TV?
What's that?
Do you not own an Apple TV?
I do not. Fans of MTJC will recall that I never went down the Apple TV route because at the time, Amazon and Apple were fighting. So being a Prime household, we just couldn't deal with not having the free Prime Video stuff. Now, subsequent to that, they have kissed and made up, very similar to HBO Max and Roku. So I think you could watch just about anything you wanted on darn near any streaming device. So it's a whole new world.
What was I saw the other day? Some Apple TV TV's coming to something else too. We talked about it's coming to the Xbox system. It's already on the PlayStation. I saw it on something else the other day, Apple TV. It's getting out there. Oh,
it's coming to
Windows.
It's coming to Chromecast.
But is it Windows? Maybe that's coming to. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they announced the other day that it's coming to Chromecast. It hadn't been on Chromecast before.
Right. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah. I just thought that this is sort of the move that Apple made to get the iPhone and the iPod out there was they wrote a version of iTunes for Windows, and that opened up the whole world to them, right? Yeah, that's how we ended up with podcasting, because it became a popular medium, right?
Yep. Well, depending on the podcast.
We got more listeners this last episode. I don't know what happened, but yeah,
they just love us. That's what it is.
Well, I tried listening us on Amazon Music, and I don't know if that worked or didn't work or whatever. But I had put the show in before, but I tried again last week, and we seemed to double our audience.
Cool,
which is nice. Yeah, thanks for listening, folks.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, and speaking on that note, there, Jonathan, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you,
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
All right, my name is Timitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. Until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.
That's my best Gracie Allen.
Is it? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Good night, Gracie.
Pretty good. Yeah. It's funny when Quinn when they say, say goodbye, Grandpa, she says goodbye, Grandpa. And I say goodbye, Grandpa to her. She looks at me. She's like, what? She just smiles. Okay. He's losing it again,
she thinks, Grandpa's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. You be the weird grandpa, I'll be the weird uncle. It'll all work out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, Bob. How many more sleeps to go till Christmas?
It is a week from, well, technically for us, it's a week from today because it's Friday already. But yeah, a week from Friday. So.
Actually, got to open up Pi Day Countdown. I posted the other day that it was 17 days left in Pi Day Countdown, or Pi Day, till the end of the year.
Yeah, weird.
Where's Pi Day Countdown? There we go. Okay, let's put in Happy Pi Day. No, let's put in the end of the year. Let's go to more dates. What do we want? New Year's Eve?
So for me, granted I'm
Happy
in a different time zone, it says 7 days, 3 hours on the countdown widget that I'm using.
Yeah,
I got 13 days. What?
Do you say to Christmas or to New Year's Day? New Year's Day is 14 days, 3 hours.
New Year's Day. I want to get 2020 over with.
Oh, there you
right?
go. Yeah,
Sorry. Oh, yeah.
As we record on Friday, 18th, it's now 13 days, 23 hours until 2020 is done.
Can't come soon enough. But let's have some Christmas first.
Yeah, but I'm just going to do a quick screenshot, post this on Twitter. Jaime, if you go to Twitter right now, there's a post of a what do you call a USDZ object of C-3PO. You can have full-size C-3PO in your living room right now.
This is on Twitter? Where on Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter. Here, I'll comment you. I'll mention you. Let me retweet this with your name on it. So, Dev with the hair. There you go. You're welcome. Just for you. And the silence is he. What?
It's thinking about it.
Twitter's thinking about it?
This website is thinking about it. Twitter and everything else is fast. This website's a little slow.
Oh,
Maybe they're getting pummeled with everybody sharing it on Twitter. Like, why is our bill going up so fast?
Yeah. The DOS attack from Star Wars fans.
Ooh, let's see this. Okay, show me. It's still loading the thing. Wow. Am I going to be able to zoom in and see the actor's zits through the eye slits, or what's...
I don't know. It's right up your alley, though.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be cool if I can get it to load.
Yeah.
Maybe they're having issues right now, again, with everybody trying to get down the same asset at the same time.
Maybe, could be.
Oh, there we go. It's finally loading. Ooh, look at that. Hey, that's really neat.
You have like a full-size C-3PO in your living room?
I wouldn't say he's full size. He ended up kind of zoomed. Maybe I accidentally made him smaller. Now he's too big. Now he's like Dr. Manhattan in my room. I gotta reload this baby.
Just a leg in your room?
Yeah.
As he goes through the ceiling? Right, foot.
Yeah, but this is
I saw an
pretty...
exhibit once of, I saw a Star Wars exhibit in Seattle of all places, and they had the original C-3PO costume there. All right, well, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin soon, so 1 o'clock!
Yeah.
I only have 3 more days of work left. Woo! In the year of like full-time work, that is.
Yeah, we've got one more day, and that one day involves half a day, which is the online Microsoft Teams Christmas party. So that ought to be a good time.
That's tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, okay. And then you're done? You're off on Monday?
Yep. Yeah. Tomorrow's my last day, and then I'm off for 16 glorious days in a row.
All right. 15?
16, which would be even better if my wife wasn't working for 7 consecutive days starting on Saturday, including Christmas Day.
Right. But, yeah, I don't know I haven't counted how many days I have, but I'm taking 5 days of vacation. But I guess there's some extra weekends and stuff in there too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I guess you're counting Saturday and Sunday too, right?
Yep.
You're 16.
Yep.
Alrighty, folks. Talk to you later.
All right, take it easy, guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy your C-3PO. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Tonight in Arkansas, there's a mother tucking in her daughter and turning off the light. A business owner is burning the midnight oil. An at-home dinner date is plating up possibility. And it's all happening under one roof. How? The power of a conversation, like the one John from Integrity Solutions had with First Horizon Bank about his vision for a sustainable mixed-use building. Now it's not just words, it's life. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/John. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.